All right, everyone, this is looking at the nervous system. This is our brain, all the way down to the nerves at the tip of our fingers, and what those do, how they influence us, and our psychology. So, first in the center of all this is the central nervous system, or the CNS for short. This consists of your brain and your spinal cord. A good way to think about this is the CPU, or the central processing unit, if you wanted to look at it like a computer. This is that for us. All right, you have the brain, the center of our whole nervous system, the spinal cord. What this does is this ultimately connects our brain to the rest of our body. Branching off from that, mainly from the spinal cord, is the peripheral nervous system, or the PNS. Um, and what this does is this is the part this is the part of our nervous system that literally just branches off from our spinal cord all the way to the rest of our bodies. So whenever we're able to feel our hands rubbing against each other or something, that is the peripheral nervous system collecting that information, sending it to our spine, shooting it up to our brain, where it is later reassembled into those sensations. Now, within the peripheral nervous system is kind of two parts. You have the somatic nervous system, or the SNS, and the autonomic nervous system, the ANS. The somatic nervous system is the part of our peripheral nervous system that controls our voluntary activities, or our voluntary actions. So whenever you lift your hand, or you wave at someone, or you pick up your fork to eat, that is regulated by your somatic nervous system. On the flip side, you have your autonomic nervous system. This is the part of our nervous system that controls our involuntary actions. So, for example, after you take a bite out of your food, and you don't really control your esophagus as it squeezes that food all the way down into your stomach, where your stomach will churn and grind and spew acid at whatever you ate and all that other grindy stuff. You don't really control what your stomach does. Don't even get me started with the intestines. But you don't have direct control of them because those are regulated by your autonomic nervous system. And again, this controls your, other things like your heart rate, your blood pressure, whether you sweat or not. All of that is regulated by that. It's all those involuntary actions that we cannot control. And then within the autonomic nervous system are two other little sub branches. You have your sympathetic nervous system and your parasympathetic nervous system. Your sympathetic nervous system is pretty much the nervous system that prepares your body for fight or flight. So whenever there's an emergency, or you're stressed out, or you're about to do something kind of strenuous, the sympathetic nervous system fires up, and can speeds up your heart rates. They do this, or it does this, so it can supply oxygen and nutrients to the right body tissues, mainly your muscles. Constricts some arteries so that blood can flow to your muscles, and increases the blood pressure, suspends some certain activities like digestion. And this is actually why, for example, if you've ever been in a situation where you're hungry, something happens, you get upset. Like maybe you're you're driving to McDonald's or something, and some idiot cuts you off, and you got to slam on your brakes, and then you're like all mad because that person almost killed you. And then when you get to McDonald's, you're like, I'm not really hungry anymore. It's because of the sympathetic nervous system. It puts you in fight or flight mode, and because of that, it powered down your digestion and your hunger and those types of things. Um, then you got your parasympathetic nervous system, and this works to conserve energy and enhance the body's ability to recover from strenuous activity. So this will reduce your heart rate, lower your blood pressure, and bring your body back to a normal resting state. Pretty much this is where this is kind of like your non-emergency default, where you're just kind of just living. And no problems. Then here's this diagram to kind of show this. Parasympathetic, it's like sometimes they call it the rest and digest response. Your pupils are constricted, you have increased saliva, your decreased heart rate, all those little things that happen to you. And then when you end up, fight or flight mode, where it's either, you fight to the death or run away, your pupils will dilate, saliva production's decreased because you're not exactly worrying about eating, you're more worried about trying to survive, heart rate goes up, and then, but yeah, that's kind of what happens to you physiologically. And then your reflexes. These are ultimately things that are taken care of by the spinal cord. So if you've ever done when you go to the doctor and he wails on your knee with a hammer, or the little mallet thing, um, and you can't, and your knee just jumps, and you can't control that. That's because that's actually being controlled by your spinal cord. Your spinal cord takes care of all those side types of things. And that's why it's like, you can sit there and the doctor's like tapping your knee and your knee is jumping and you're like, I can't control it. Yeah, your brain cognitively cannot control that because that falls under the spinal cord. Spinal cord does that. And so what they're doing whenever they are tapping on your knee is, they're testing your spinal cord, making sure your spinal cord is working. Um, because again, if they start tapping on your knee and your knee doesn't do anything, that means ultimately something is wrong with your spine. And it could be, caused, from an injury, fracture, compression, or, some sort of like neurological disease or something. And that is actually one of the easiest ways to tell if there's something wrong with the spinal cord. That's why they do it so much. And yeah, that's actually pretty much all that we really need to cover for the nervous system. Kind of short, but again, this is, for our purposes in psychology, because, when we do talk about things like emotion and motivation and those types of things, this is kind of the physiological side of those things, because I won't really get into it right now, even though it would be tempting. But again, like when you're upset, when you're mad, physiologically things happen. Your heart rate goes up. Because there's a physical component to all of the psychological or cognitive components that go with it as well. And there's a lot of different theories about emotion. Save that for another day. And yeah, so that's about all. Peace out.